you, Nima. Good afternoon, everybody. So you'll notice, first of all, this hasn't got the QAAFI or the UQ branding on it, and that's because this is really on behalf of the Academy of Science, or more particularly its National Committee for Nutrition. So I'll give you a bit of context first before getting into the details of what we've done and what we're proposing. So it's just a book launch. So here's the book. We're not giving away paper copies because we're too environmentally conscious for that. But if you Google decadal plan nutrition, the top 6 hits all lead you directly to this. So we are the only decadal plan for nutrition in the world, which is nice to know. So the Australian Academy of Science has a number of committees covering different discipline areas, a little bit random, some of the areas they do and do not cover, but nutrition is one of those areas. So for the last 2.5 years, or since the beginning of 2017, I've been the chair of the National Committee for Nutrition. And so one of the actions that the Australian Academy of Science does in order to stimulate science in particular areas is to undergo decadal plans. So decadal plans are a foresighting exercise. They are intended to be a community-based exercise, so I'll tell you about the process, how we got to that. And they're not meant to be prescriptive at all. They're meant to be aspirational and hopefully inspirational in terms of just putting some context around where the science may go into the future. So the other point of saying before we start is the decadal plan for the science of nutrition. We started off by saying a decadal plan for nutrition, but that becomes much broader, so we're limiting to the science of nutrition. So excluded from this is all discussion about health policy. We're all about the evidence that's needed to make good health policy, but we're not about the rights and wrongs of particular policy directions. So that's why it's deliberately called the Decadal Plan for the Science of Nutrition. And that's because we're the Academy of Sciences. We're not really the professional nutrition body per se, although we have representatives of that. So we have a tagline, as you can see. So it's not just about health benefits, but it's about the way in which nutrition has a broader impact on environmental and economic activities in the country. So that will also be hopefully evident as we go through. So here are the names of the people who are currently on the National Committee for Nutrition. Those in red have done the majority of the work as the expert working group. So Steve Simpson from the University of Sydney and myself co-chaired that group. Steve is a fellow of the Academy and so was our representative on the fellowship who could be the interface with the executive of the Academy. But Melinda, Manny, David and Helen and I did the majority of the writing. Steve was the main editor. And so as a team, it all came together well, particularly with an excellent project manager, Hayley Teasdale from the Academy. And we also had some funding. There's a Learned Academy Special Projects Fund that we were successful in getting money for. That was important because that allowed Hayley to come offline from other duties and spend 50% of her time working on this plan. And that really enabled us to do what we then did, which was quite an extensive consultation process. So the way we did this, we started off with an event that was already in the calendar before I joined up, which was Theo Murphy High Flyers think tank. This is another thing that the Academy does. You can go on their website and see the various think tanks that have been run. And Steve Simpson had organized this Rethinking Food and Nutrition Science, which we held in Perth in the middle of 2017. So this was an EMCR forum. So this was really about looking to people who are going to be the next generation of leaders. What do they think and feel around where the nutrition-food interface goes? So that was an important input into our thinking. As a result of that, we drafted a consultation paper, which we launched at the Dietitians Association annual convention in May last year. And then had a whole series of workshops with the community around that consultation paper, coming up with the issues and the ideas that we wanted to put into the decadal plan. And that all got incorporated into the first draft, which was my summer work. So I didn't go on holiday last summer. I wrote a decadal plan. And then over the next few months, we had some targeted engagement to refine and get that right. And finally, it was launched just a few weeks ago. So here's the consultation we went through. So all through winter of last year was a fairly comprehensive road tour. So we consulted with large numbers of organisations and people to try and get that appropriate. So hopefully some of you were here at the Brisbane event, which we held at the GCI here. And of course, it got refined as we went through the process, and that's the point of having numerous of these workshops. You start off with a relatively rough idea, and then you gradually refine. And there's a consistency of message across the country, so people in different states have rather similar ways of thinking about what the future of the science of nutrition should be, so it didn't really change that much, but it allowed us to refine and refine until we got down to a workable draft. So here's just a very simplistic, very high-level overview of the sorts of things that people were saying to us, some of the things that we needed to do, some of the reasons why we needed a plan, misinformation, standardization, knowing what we know, and in the end, it's really about a secure and sustainable food and nutrition system. So this was a pretty consistent set of messages that we got, which was all good. And some of the reasons why, so we also asked, it's not just about health, but what are the other benefits that having a better handle on the science of nutrition would bring us? Of course, there's a strong overlap with the agriculture and food sector, as well as the reduced burden of disease and the equitable access. So that's about getting good food to everyone at an affordable price. But also, as you will probably be aware, there's a much stronger and growing connection with environmental sustainability. So food sustainability, environmental sustainability, nutritional security are all being woven together. And so the future is an integrated one that covers all of those things. So here we are at the launch. So one of the, from a QAAFI perspective, one of the gratifying things where we were casting around for a minister to come and launch this. And the person that put their hand up quickest was Senator Mackenzie, the Minister for Agriculture. She came along and we had a launch event in Canberra. That's Steve, that's Therese Jefferson from the ARC who supported the project. She said exactly the right words. I didn't have to put them on her plate. She said, nutrition is the future of agriculture. So she very much has this in mind, that the purpose of agriculture is very directly linked to nutrition. She used to be, before she was Minister for Agriculture, she used to be Minister for Rural Health, and I think that's got a lot to do with that perspective as well. So it's really nice to see that coalescence of agriculture and nutrition, and that's part of the aspiration we should be going for. So getting a bit more into it. So all I'm going to say is in the book. I know you can get it online. The PDF is downloadable. So I'm just going to pick out a few highlights just to give you a flavour of it. So you've probably read all this already. So here's a bit of a vision statement. It's about Australia's place in the world. Always a question at the Academy around how should Australia invest the limited resources we have for research when there's so much research going on in the rest of the world. What should we be doing rather than just taking what other people are doing? So it's not just about what we can do to the global, contribute globally, but also what we can deliver locally through environmental, social, and economic benefits locally. And we also debated what are the core values. So innovation and collaboration, the sort of the doing things, but really on the basis of equity and sustainability. So those are sort of the driving principles behind what we write in the document. Some of the background, this is just some sort of selected facts, just to give you a context of the importance of tackling science of nutrition at a global level. So every country in the world is affected by malnutrition of one sort or the other. We tend to call it under or over nutrition, but malnutrition is a global phenomenon. Nutrition is a great thing to invest in terms of the cost-benefit analysis overall, particularly in reducing the burden of cost on health systems. But locally in Australia, only 10% of people eat recommended daily serves of vegetables. You know this stuff. And surprisingly, only 1 in 5 Australian adults eat the recommended amounts of fruit, which that did surprise me. And most of the key nutrition indicators, now these are defined, and I won't go through the details of them, but most of them are off target at this stage. So there are targets which are achievable, but in many cases we're going in the wrong direction, particularly at the extremes of malnutrition, of over and undernutrition. We're going probably in the wrong direction in many cases. And also it's a regional issue. So more than half of the world's malnourished children live in the Asia-Pacific region. So it's something that is also intimately linked up with our place in our local part of the world, and our roles and responsibilities in this part of the world have a lot to do with trying to do something about those malnourished children in this region. So a lot of call to arms sort of stuff there, and for those of you who are familiar with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, a lot of these sorts of strategic planning things take account of these. Diet quality or nutritional security is really at the heart of the majority of the Sustainable Development Goals, and this is not our graph, this is from the UN, and how they've looked at the role of nutrition in terms of addressing the Sustainable Development Goals. You don't need to look at the details, it's just to get an impression of just how central and critical good nutrition can be in leading to attaining these SDGs. So here's the plan. And then what I'm going to do now is take you through an overview of what we are recommending or aspiring to, and then just drill down a little bit of detail into each of those areas. So this is the one figure which says it all. So it's complex because we're trying to cover most of what we're trying to say in the document here. I'll show this 2 or 3 times so that you get used to seeing it. So we say enabling platforms. Clearly we think this should be a national research priority, and I know everyone would say that, but we'll get into some evidence for that in a while. 2 things that we think are needed. One is a capability for building, storing, collecting, storing, and interrogating nutrition data. Obviously, we're in an era where data availability is abundant, data storage is cheap, but in Australia, we're really not that good at collecting and using the data we could have on our local circumstances. So a national capability for nutrition data is a top line activity. And the second specific one around a trusted voice, again, more details later, but this is about combating misinformation and working towards somewhere where people can have information about food and nutrition that is not colored by commercial or ideological slants. And this is such a big issue, a big, difficult issue. This is the wicked problem in nutrition at the moment, so we want to have a go at tackling that. The trusted voice, we think, is a key thing to have a go at. So supported by, so what are you actually going to do? Well, as well as those sorts of initiatives, then we see 4 pillars, so 3 scientific pillars and an education and training pillar. Again, more details later, but we'll talk about what we mean by these 3 and the details in the education and training. So what we're trying to do is attack the health issue, particularly it's around chronic diseases. So we're not really talking about infectious diseases here, we're talking about chronic diseases. Population health initiatives that work, easy to say, difficult to do, but are equitable. And so that's about what is the evidence you need to make population health initiatives as cost effective as possible and as efficient and as effective as possible. And it's not just about reducing health, it's also about increasing productivity. Us as organisms, our nutrition is really at the heart of how we perform physically and mentally. So that's an important part that is really coming to the fore. Sports nutrition has been a big thing for a long time, but I think nutrition for brain function is becoming even more important these days, and not just about combating dementia, but it's about positive mental acuities. So we think that's an important area that's coming through. And then, of course, you've got the economic aspects of that. So agri-food products that are driven by nutrition. Australia aspires to be a source of premium agri-food products. Nutrition is one way to achieve premium status. And also what we call Nutri-Tech. So as we have digital collection of dietary information, there is a Nutri-Tech sector that is booming at the moment worldwide, and Australia is very well placed to take part in this. That's about the tools and technology that allow data to be collected about food intake, health outcomes, and help towards diagnosis and prescription in ways that will help individuals, groups, and societies. So we see that as another sort of potentially economic benefit, as well as the health and benefits that go up there. And around all of this is an environmental ring, because the truism is that the components of a healthy diet are generally also healthy for the environment. So let's a bit more detail in these enabling platforms. We'll come on to a bit more justification of why we think this should be a national research priority. Partly it's because of the breadth that's involved. So this is about integrating across disciplines. So this is about taking social and biological and physical sciences together and trying to tackle the integration of human biology, consumer choice, the psychology, as well as the food production and distribution systems. The National Capability for Nutrition data is really about understanding what it is that individuals, groups, nations are eating, what their health outcomes are in terms of Australia, in order to guide national policy with greater evidence than we currently have, devise intervention strategies that can be monitored and can be tailored if shown not to be succeeding, but also has a great stimulus to the science. So the more data they have, the more science questions arise. So we see this as a virtuous cycle here. The trusted voice, so this is around the credible and evidence-based. So it's not just about what is the information, it's also about how it is communicated. So the professional communicators is an important part of this, in our opinion. So these are communicators both online as well as verbally in interviews and so on. So this has a purpose of both being a fact-checking, a myth-busting, but also a general improvement of population nutritional literacy as a target. How these are integrated, just another picture from the decadal plan. So what we see the national capability being is the resource that takes information about food intake and biomarkers, and as well as health and wellness outcomes as data, converts it into knowledge, integrates with what's going on in the rest of the world, and feeds the trusted voice communication. So I think there's a clear pathway there to building the credibilities. If it's based, the credibility is improved as the quality of the data is improved, as people see that it is based on large amounts of data from a representative cohort of people. So the sort of things that we want to suggest and we want to try and activate is instead of doing national nutrition surveys on an irregular or infrequent basis, and often an incomplete basis, the technology we have for data capture now should make this a lot easier, and it should make it easier for us to be capturing information about nutrition, food intake, nutritional outcomes, and health outcomes more in real time. So there are tools and technologies that are already there. We have all of our data collection through our phones, from the phone to the cloud to whatever. You know, there's a lot of possibilities here in collecting and analyzing very large data sets with a lot of precision. So we'd like to see that happening. It hasn't happened yet in the world of nutrition, but this is absolutely the right time to do this. And this is really, so that's raw data, and of course there is the science and nutrition continually doing studies of specific aspects, and so study outcomes should be integrated with whole population data. Of course, the limitation of whole population data is it's observational, and you're not testing any mechanisms, you're simply observing and statistically analyzing. So it always has to be backed up by hypothesis testing experiments, so that's the integration side. And really this is the point about generating knowledge which can be acted upon. The knowledge that can be acted upon will require, for credibility, will require good observational as well as mechanistic studies. And of course that is what then leads straight into the robustness of the evidence, and therefore the ability to establish the credibility of the trusted messages. So I think the principle is relatively straightforward. The practice is devilishly difficult, but this is what we're setting out to do. So back to our overview picture. So I'm going to now go through each of these 4 pillars and just a little bit more detail of those, and so hopefully you can see something about how we see these coming together. So here's the other overview. So this is pillar 1, 2, 3, 4, and another way of wording it in a sense that tries to answer the question about why Australia. So why should this be areas that Australia looks at? So the first one is around social determinants, and this is really societal determinants. So what is it about the societal environment that influences the relationship between food choice, food access, and health outcomes? We think Australia is a great model system globally to do this. We are geographically isolated. We are ethnically reasonably diverse. We are geographically very diverse. But we have a single system and we don't have too many people. So all of those things sort of come together, and there's not really another country on earth that could have that combination of characteristics. So we'd like to sort of propose that Australia should be looking to be the model system where we can have a predictive agri-food inputs and outputs, inputs and consequences type of model that would cover the whole country. Now, this is big, ambitious type of goal, but we think this is a good reason, not only because of the equity aspects of delivering good health to everyone, but also why Australia should particularly invest in this. So we're looking to see what's the framework for the agri-food system, what's the predictable framework. So how can you put together a framework of where the inputs and outputs can be tested and can be used to make predictions about, okay, if we change this, we predict this will be the outcome. So that's our ambition in the first pillar. More details on the next slides. The second pillar is around human biology. So this is nutrition mechanisms. So this is the general mechanisms. This is what most people think about the science of nutrition, the mechanisms by which diets influence human biology. Notice I say diets here, and this is absolutely the cornerstone now. This is not about foods or meals. It's definitely not about individual nutrients. It's about whole diets. And that is the complexity, and that is the challenge, that focusing on individual nutrients is okay when you're trying to combat deficiency diseases. But beyond that, beyond overcoming deficiencies, good health is really all about the totality of the diet. And this is something which is really a challenging issue to get your heads around. So those mechanisms, but then linking to that is the fact that the way in which us as individuals or as groups defined by location, ethnicity, background, various ways of grouping people differ. And we differ, obviously we differ at the genetic level, but we also differ at the local environment level. And all of those things have a significant influence. And so this is the precision and personalized nutrition area. The biology is the same, but we're saying as individuals we are different, and so therefore there'll be different responses at that level. And this is really where the combination of helping with local equity and nutrition security, equitable access to food and security of nutrition, coupled with value to the premium agri-food sector, and also leading a Nutritech startup sector. And of course, Australia does a lot of training. And you remember back in one of the early slides, half of the world's malnourished children are in the Asia-Pacific region. There's a huge cry out now for training for people to action against that. So Australia has a big role, we think, in being the provider of training that will assist our regional neighbours in achieving some of their nutrition goals. So developing high-level nutrition education services is another sort of characteristic of Australia. So these are the things, this is to answer the why Australia question. So now one level further down into each of the individual pillars. So pillar 1, social or societal determinants. A slightly complex slide, but it's just to sort of get the point that the response of people to diets is partly it builds from their physiology and their diet, but is also greatly affected by individual and group behavior, and especially the environment in which we operate. So the commercial, the ethical, the social environment that all these food and nutrition events occur on. There's an argument that the drivers of change are really right up here. So we're not going to change human physiology, even though the gene editing guys might have a go at it, but we're really going to change, but changing the environment is really the way to go. So changing the environment has the greatest opportunity to drive change. Nutrition science is the other way around. So we're saying here, this is where you need to integrate the sciences, the social, economic, behavioral sciences with the nutrition science, or really it's one science, the science of nutrition. So notice we say the science of nutrition, we don't say nutrition science. So the science of nutrition includes social and behavioral sciences. So this is about integrating and making sure that we prioritize that we have activities across all of these levels at which nutritional change can be affected. So that's pillar one. Now, the way in which we've looked at this as a decadal plan, so we challenged ourselves. We started off with a statement, it's 2030. That's not 8:30, that's 10 years' time. It's 2030, what do we want to achieve? What does success look like? So this is the what does success look like type of statements, and you'll see it in the plan for each of the pillars. So this is imagining the future so that you can sort of have an idea of how you might get there. So, I mean, these are very grand, aspirational sort of words, but this is the type of approach that we can see, that this is about providing holy grail type targets that people can hopefully see a way towards addressing. So this was about, as we talked about, the model for integrating dietary and environmental factors for the food system, taking Australia as a whole country with a modest population, a single organized system, but a lot of diversity within it. So that, and if that can be done, then that can lead to more successful targeted interventions of whatever type. The national priority, this is part of our scope of the national priority, is saying it's about integrating the biological physical sciences that are normally the purview of nutrition with the social and behavioral and economic sciences, because it is that integration that will lead to better societal health outcomes. So this is about a play for the integrated science approach. And also really at a whole of government level, we think that the societal factors will be the way in which you can most quickly influence attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, both locally but also regionally. So we see this as also a part of our role as a regional player, is to address these issues, not just in Australia, but in our regional partners. So that's pillar one. Pillar two is about the general mechanisms of how diet influences human activity and health. And again, there's nothing magic about this sort of picture. There's a number of these out in the literature. So the whole of diet, but it is the whole of diet. It's not individual components. But obviously, the diet is built up of components. And then it's this integrative thing. So it's about integrating what goes on in the gut, how that interfaces with food intake, the physiological processes and the molecular processes, and suitable modeling and data analytics. So it's an integrative science at its heart, and of course with a large number of potential health outcomes. So what we say here is that this is around the individual sectors in this area will each be advancing, but the real challenge is how you integrate those together into human physiology. So here's our 2030 statements. So we would make the argument that nutrition is the paradigm for integrative science. We think that this would be, as an aspiration nationally, that we think that integrating across the disciplines is the era that we are in the scientific endeavor, and that we think that nutrition has got the right combination of importance and difficulty for this to be tackled as the example of integrative science. So this is our play for the national research priority status. That if you're serious about doing integrative science, nutrition is a great paradigm to work through. And this is about talent, really. It's about saying, there's probably some medical colleagues in the room, I like to say, I think medicine's pretty easy compared with nutrition. And so this is about trying to take some of the really bright minds that are really attracted into solving disease problems or health problems now. Actually, a lot of those the solutions to those are going to be nutrition. So getting the brightest minds engaged in the endeavor of nutrition is an important consequence of setting up as a national priority. And then this is about what you achieve. So this is the length scale stuff. So this is everything from molecules up to populations. That's what integrative means. So there's a length scale thing. And there's also, and the purpose here is generating credible hypotheses that can be tested, both for disease prevention and also improved or maximizing performance. And not only that, but also this is the integration with the agri-food sector, because as you understand these mechanisms, then if this is the country that's understanding some of those mechanisms, it has the first stab at trying to create the solutions through its agricultural and food systems. So this integration of the mechanisms through to potential food and nutrition solutions is also part of the reason for this pillar. So that's pillar 2. So pillar 3 is saying, actually, this is all the same. It's just that there are different things about it when you talk about individual people, personalized nutrition, or groups or populations of people who have a certain feature, geographical, cultural, gender, ethnicity, whatever. So there will be times when precision nutrition or local group nutrition is extremely valuable, particularly for messaging. But for those who are engaging one-on-one with the health system, it's more about personalized nutrition. And of course, this area is being revolutionized because of our understanding of the human genome, our gut microbiome, and all of the things that make us different. We can measure all those differences now, we just really don't yet know what the consequence of that is. So this is about saying there's a whole new science saying we've got the measurement tools, but what does it all mean? What are the functional consequences? And how do you convert that into dietary advice or nutritional diagnoses that are more tailored? So we all know in general, walking around and talking to people, that people can eat pretty much the same diets and have very different health outcomes. Conversely, we see people who have very similar health outcomes who have eaten hugely diverse diets. Both of these are part of this challenge. So it's not about narrowing down and saying you must eat this diet. It's recognizing there are many, many different ways of achieving a good, healthy status through diverse dietary approaches. But rather than focusing on a single one, why should that be so? What do we measure? How do we assess current status, and how do we make diagnoses and prescriptions for improved status, or options for improved status? So it's a little bit about going away from being completely prescriptive and saying you must follow this diet, saying, well, if this is your current status, this is your genetics, this is your environment, here are a whole range of potential options, and they will take you at a certain point, as long as you can be monitored as you go through. So with multiple monitoring, so it's not just about weight and blood pressure and blood glucose, this is about dozens of monitoring with either in-home or under medical advice. So there's a lot of opportunities here to take this general population information, which is a very broad distribution, and make it more selective and personalized. So we think this is an area that Australia is actually pretty good in this area. So we have got reasonable credentials in here. We've always been good at the sports science and performance nutrition end of things. And we have an opportunity here to really make some strides, we think. So it's not just about it's not just about individuals, but this is about technology that's maybe applied to individuals now, but will get rolled out to everyone into the future. So this is the analogy with mobile phones, that 30 years ago that was for the wealthy few, now they're ubiquitous. And so you develop the technology for people who can afford to pay it, but actually it gets rolled out pretty quickly to a general population. So that might be how this goes. You've probably read all that now. So the fourth pillar, education and training. So this is about 3 levels of education and more. But one is about nutrition literacy in the general population. Nutrition is a really difficult subject to get across because people like precise yes/no answers, and it's always yes, it's always probably, it depends, but, and there's never a clear definition there. So getting people to understand about uncertainty and statistics is all woven into this as well. So I think, so the trusted voice will be a very important part of this. So if we can get to a trusted voice where people have that faith that they're hearing what can be believed rather than what is tainted by commercial or ideological interests, then we have the main starting point for this. But we also see that there's a lot of opportunity and need for building nutrition skills into health professionals, care professionals, anyone who has parents, people who have some responsibility for others. So that there is still a lack of awareness of what can be done nutritionally. But there's going to be such a lot of data out there that will allow people to make these sorts of choices and diagnoses that we see this as being a set of careers for people who can be the interpreters, who can understand what it means if you've got this profile and this. It's not necessarily at the doctor level, it might not even be at a dietitian level, it's whatever will come out of being, of taking all the data that will be available and understanding what it could mean for individuals and groups. We think this is, whether it's called an Academy of Nutrition, but one of the issues we have in this country and many other countries around the world have is there's not a single voice for nutrition. So we have a number of agencies, particularly the Dietitians Association and the Nutrition Society of Australia. So they are representative, they are member bodies, and they talk on behalf of their members. But we don't quite have that credibility that talks to the general population in a way that, for instance, the Australian Medical Association might do. So we often see a spokesperson from the AMA talking on the news or whatever about issues. We don't have that sort of agency in nutrition. There are some individual excellent proponents of good nutrition messages, but it's at an individual level. There isn't an agency that really covers that. So we think that's an important aspect that will bring together nutrition professionals. Okay, so that's the overview. Back to our diagram again. Now, just the final slide is so what now? So this is a plan. It's definitely aspirational, hopefully inspirational, but it's not. But the next stage is about implementation. So aspiration to implementation. So what we are currently doing is trying to get the governance structures and business cases together for the National Capability for Nutrition Data and Trusted Voice possibly as a package. So talking with agencies about how that might happen, what would need to occur to bring that together. And part of that is also bringing together the Dietitians Association, Nutrition Society, and other agencies and other membership bodies to try and find a way in which they can all come together with a single purpose in terms of providing that voice for the nutrition sector. What was really important in getting to this plan was that we did have that extensive consultation. So this is a plan, it's not a plan of the Academy, it's hopefully a plan for the sector. And so there'll be a certain amount of rollout going on, and the intention is that this is a plan that people can cite and can guide some thoughts. It's not, no one's going to monitor it, so we hope that people will take it up. Or the committee will monitor it, but it will not be within our power to action it. Other people will need to action it. So turning the plan from aspiration to operation, it really will involve that concerted action of the stakeholders. So that's our our purpose in the next year or so will be to try and find the fora in which the major stakeholders can come together to create this a single a coherent voice that will allow these national initiatives to go forward, so that it's seen as it feels and smells like a national research priority. So it's also about understanding what are the big technical challenges that we could do as individual projects. The Academy is not sponsor, it doesn't sponsor any projects, but it would be great if this was inspired people to get together and form networks and groups and apply to the NHMRC and ARC and other agencies to get nutrition science up. That's the purpose here. It's not to say you must do this, it's to say, well, have you thought about these sorts of areas? So that's it. So as I say, if you Google decadal plan nutrition, you'll get to the PDF directly. Please do go and read it. We spent quite a lot of time and effort putting this together. Absolutely welcome feedback, because we want to make sure that there are things here that can be actioned. And so we look forward to that. And hopefully you'll hear a bit more about this in the years ahead. If we can make this a bit of a framework for how the science of nutrition is handled in Australia, we will be very happy, and hopefully will give people some focus that they can associate with, and will give us a bit more credentials in talking to government agencies and funding bodies about the importance of the science of nutrition. So with that, I'll stop and say thank you and welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Questions?
Mike, the trusted voice thing is it's definitely needed.
Sure.
But how do you create a trusted voice? You know, it's not going to be Pete Evans, and if it's you, people will say, "Oh, but his university's funded by Monsanto."
Right. Right. So that's why we need some sort of agency, Academy of Nutrition or something. I mean, that's why it's got to be removed from any taints. Yeah, it's not a straightforward thing. It will take time. So I guess that's why we see the integration of the data, national capability for data. If you say this is a voice that's built on that capability of data, that's a good starting point. So it's saying that this is based on information on our local circumstances and an interpretation of that. The challenges come